We always try to stick to the facts, but right now I am about to air something false, something incendiary, and not to reward it with attention, but to expose it and perhaps ensure that it's not normalized. A major TV channel, Fox News, just broke out a smear that is unusual even in our intensely polarized politics, this weekend questioning whether the nonpartisan rule of law in America is itself a coup against Trump.
The investigation was weaponized to destroy his presidency for partisan political purposes. Now, if that's true, we have a coup on our hands in America. If you have these people plotting what it appears to be some sort of subversion campaign against the president or the president-elect, how dangerous is that?
Jesse, it's toxic, it's lethal.
How dangerous? A Fox News program is raising the specter of a coup when your White House aide there, who is paid with your tax dollars, is embracing this approach. And this was not just a poorly chosen word in the heat of an interview, which can happen. The headline banner there on your screen shows this pre-planned, deliberate frame, a coup in America. Brian Stelter, a former New York Times journalist who now works at CNN, notes that cable news banners don't just appear out of thin air. Producers brainstorm, fact-check, proofread them. Mistakes do slip through occasionally, but this, referring to that coup, he said, doesn't look like a mistake. Words matter. Words have meaning. A coup is the violent overthrow of an existing government, which involves seizing control of the armed forces. If you watch the news, and I bet you do, because you're doing it right now, you have probably seen actual coups, like the attempted coup in Turkey last year.
Troops seen closing off a main bridge in Istanbul. Then it escalated fast as reports came pouring in of army soldiers taking command of government buildings, a presidential office, and TV stations. The prime minister announced that a coup was underway.
Or take Chile, where a democracy gave way to a military coup in 1973.
The country began to pull itself together after a violent coup d'etat. The tanks, along with Air Force planes, set afire the presidential palace, which is where Allende died. Nobody knows how many people were killed or injured in the fighting, but Santiago is full of bullet holes, and some estimates of the casualties range as high as 1,000 people dead.
Those are coups. When they work, brute force is used to crush the rule of law. And it's the rule of law that Trump's allies are undermining by attacking this lawful Russia probe. You might think it's ironic that the forces undermining the rule of law are also the forces questioning whether other people are behind a coup. But it's not ironic at all. This follows a long pattern of abuse. And if a cable news banner ever called out for Orwell, it is this one. Remember, in his famous essay on language and politics, he wrote that political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. This is all maddeningly hypocritical because it's supposed to be. The ultimate goal is to achieve, through hyperbole and through this nonsense, what cynics have not yet achieved through typical public debate. They want to make you lose faith that we can get through this as a republic. I'm joined now by Richard Painter, former chief White House ethics lawyer under George W. Bush, and Malcolm Nance, U.S. intelligence and terrorism expert and author of The Plot to Hack America. Malcolm, are you concerned about this? And given your national security background, do you see a coup in America?
Well, I'm very concerned about the use of the rhetoric around this. This is almost psychological warfare preparation of the battlefield. That's what we would say, where they are trying to frame a narrative around the nation now that has a lot more to do than a Mueller investigation. I mean, if the Mueller investigation comes through, it will have been done in the Department of Justice. They're trying to say that the entire framework of the United States government's system of removing a president or finding out dirt about a president, that in itself is tantamount to a military force or a force removing people in power. We just saw a coup in Zimbabwe recently where the first thing that happened was the army hits the streets, they seize all the radio and TV stations. I mean, you know, I'm sure that's Fox's worst nightmare. But this is not a coup. And this language is dangerous. It is, you know, they have a right to free speech,
sure,
but you know what they don't have a right to? Sedition. They don't have a right to undermine the Constitution of the United States.
Richard Painter, I want to read some of the reaction because it has been swift and it has been across the spectrum. Defense One writer Kevin Barron, coup, I cover wars, militaries, actual coups, citizens violently rise up and kill. This is alarmingly irresponsible language, he wrote, even for Fox. A Ted Cruz official said the Fox News use of the word coup is destabilizing U.S. democracy, should be roundly condemned. Former CIA Director John McLaughlin, who you know, clearest example of collusion is among GOP and Fox News to delegitimize Bob Mueller's inquiry. Richard.
Well, I think we are in danger. Our democracy's in danger. But there's one person in control of the military right now. The commander-in-chief is Donald Trump. And there is a risk of him using that power to destroy our democracy, whether you call it a coup or anything else. But it's not from the critics of Donald Trump that the danger is posed. It's the fact that the man who is commander-in-chief of our military is engaged in obstruction of justice and other crimes and is also psychologically deranged. And I think we are in very, very serious trouble. And the next 2 weeks are going to be critical to make sure that Robert Mueller stays in place. And
you say the next 2 weeks, Richard, and we were discussing this at the top of the broadcast. What is it about the next 2 weeks specifically that concern you?
First of all, we're on the holiday, so we have a lot of the members of the House and Senate are away. And if Robert Mueller were to get fired, the only responsible thing to do would be to convene both the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee immediately. And I don't care if that happens to happen on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or New Year's or whatever. We'd have to swing into action in 24 hours. And they're off on holiday. And the second thing is the Democrats have had the lack of wisdom of forcing out Senator Al Franken, who is probably the most articulate member, certainly one of the most articulate members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He caught the Attorney General in a perjury trap, and those are exactly the senators we need, and we need congressmen ready to step to the plate within 24 hours if Robert Mueller is fired. And now we have one of our leading members of the Senate Judiciary Committee who apparently is going to resign. So this is a very vulnerable situation over the next few weeks, and we need to get through it so Robert Mueller can finish his job.
Malcolm, listen again to Congressman Gates, who I mentioned in the broadcast, because he has been leading this charge against Mueller, and our producers were researching this, and it turns out he was actually using this same word. It didn't get quite as much attention, but he was using the same word last month.
We are at risk of a coup d'etat in this country if we allow an unaccountable person with no oversight to undermine the duly elected president of the United States. And I would offer that is precisely what is happening right now with the indisputable conflicts of interest that are present with Mr. Mueller.
You look at that, and then, Malcolm, you look at the playbook, and I know you're both a student and an author of history, but this was one of the themes in the last days of Nixon. There was even a private eye guy who covered this book, Silent Coup, and it tried to argue Nixon was forced out of office because of a national security party opposed to foreign policy, as the Washington Post points out. The roots of this aren't pretty, Malcolm.
No, the roots of it aren't pretty at all. And I just find it just disturbing that elected officials in the United States are using this type of rhetoric. My problem with regard to what's being said these days is far more fundamental. It's not that they're just saying it and that Fox News is broadcasting this. It's just that we have a president who is very susceptible to believing every word that they say.
Right.
And he may get it into his mind that there actually are nefarious plans that equate to a coup. And God knows what he'll do. He may not get the cooperation of the armed forces, but, you know, I mean, the way that he calls favor with the police forces and Department of Homeland Security and the Border Patrol, who knows what can happen here? This is dangerous. dangerous. It needs to stop. It is unconstitutional and is unconscionable. And I wish that as patriots to this nation, they would A, get a dictionary, look up the definition of coup, and B, stop talking about this in the way that they are, because it could manifest itself either through some small rebellion of guys with guns, or people who think they're going to come to the White House and protect it with semi-automatic weapons. I don't know. It just needs to stop.